Well, hey there team, welcome back to the channel and welcome to my review of Jurassic World Evolution 3. Some of you that are regulars on the channel might be having a double take, a bit of deja vu. Yep, we did a video of this probably a week ago when it came out. Very surface level, the 2-hour overviews as I've been wont to do in recent times. However, and if you'll permit me a moment of self-indulgence, a little bit of a forward, I kind of want a do-over. In fact, I want to return to form a little bit. Would you believe that almost to the day, I think within one day, 2 years ago was when I started this series, Worth Your Time, Worth Your Money. And a lot of that was born out of frustration and dare I say, a bit of angst on my part at the review scene in gaming. How self-important a lot of the counter reviewers of YouTube are, and also, you know, my feeling of, homelessness from the mainstream review space also. I think a lot of people feel the same way. But the long and short of it is I dug out my first one of these, Return to Moria. You should go check it out. 2 years ago to the day. And it was a lot more raw and gritty. And again, reviewing reluctantly, keeping it all fairly real and grounded. And I feel like along the way, I've kind of lost my way a little bit. I've tried being self-serious with reviews to middling success. And I've also tried to production line this series into just the 2-hour reviews. I still think there's merit to saying that, even in the first 15 minutes with the game, for the most part, you can make up your mind about it. But the long and short is I feel like doing a bit of a soft reboot, going back to the roots, keeping it really loose, but also actually taking more time with these games. And in this instance, I've played this for 18 hours now, as opposed to 2. And this is a really good example of where the previous format gets it wrong, and rather I had a few takes in there that were just objectively wrong because I was kind of too short-sighted because I hadn't spent enough time with the game. So I'm absolutely happy to walk it back, eat my words, whatever you want to call it, and this might be a cause for celebration for some. Anyway, I don't want to waffle too much at the beginning, but like I said, go check some of the older stuff where it was a bit more gritty, and the hope is maybe we can return to form. So on that, the only real rules that I have is, this is unstructured. No dot points, no nothing. It's all off the cuff. Thoughts that have been rolling around in my head for the past couple of days, right? And in the past, I've flirted with like a $5 to 1 hour conversion, which works out in the aggregate, as it were. The problem with that is you end up spending more time with a AAA game that costs $120. Jesus, it's ridiculous these days. Whereas, I don't spend enough time with like a $20 smaller game that probably has 10 times more content. There's a good theory, but it needed refining. So again, long and short of it, and we'll get into this game in proper, the idea is on average to give games 18 hours in the sun. I've talked about this in the past. If you go to How Long to Beat and you just check the aggregate over every year, basically for the past decade, it does float between 16 to 20 hours on average to beat a game, but 18 is usually where it really sits. So I think that's more than fair. So we'll give them 18 hours, we'll render a review, and then off you go, informed by an idiot with a microphone. Again, apologies for the intro, but I'm not going to make a dedicated video or anything like that, but mark this as a bit of a stepping off point of inflection. So Jurassic World Evolution 3. Let's be clear, I love this game. I love it to bits. I was a bit scared, a bit apprehensive or skeptical going into it because my background, my pedigree is I loved Operation Genesis back in the day, which is what this series is a spiritual successor to, if we're being candid. That was on the original Xbox, the big black box, I'm pretty sure. And it was like a consolification of an RTS, park management game. You've had experiments with those over the years since and before, but that was the first one that really sort of, in my mind, made you realize it was doable if it was considered as a ground-up design perspective. Anyway, that falls by the wayside. The consoles move on. Jurassic World Evolution 1 comes along, and that, in turn, is a spiritual successor to the first one. Much like, the theme hospital games have successors in the 2 Point Hospital series onward, right? They're sort of running in parallel. And Jurassic World Evolution 1, I loved. Near and dear to my heart. Some people argued in the last video I did on this that it doesn't quite hold up. That's fine, I get that. However, I've still gone back to it like last year, and I love it to death. And in many ways, it is the spiritual successor to the OG. Then comes along Jurassic World Evolution 2, which is the one I've spent the least amount of time on. it makes the biggest jump graphically, like the fidelity, the graphics, the realism. And you can see that the developers and publisher, they do the whole thing themselves, Frontier Developments, are really starting to move it to its close cousin and their tentpole game series, Planet Zoo. They've also done like Planet Coaster and all that. So this whole theme park video gamification of things is absolutely their bread and butter. And Planet Zoo's got 1 billion DLCs. I haven't spent nearly enough time with it, tragically. It's really good though. And while it does hold on to some sort of cartoonized graphics around the character models of humans, there is a fidelity, a realism, really big focus in the animations and the general beauty of the animals, which I would argue is what people are there for. And while there is a cross-section and overlap between, the Jurassic World fans, which is me, and the Planet Zoo fans, which is someone else, with Jurassic World Evolution 2, we saw not even drift, because drift infers being a drift, right? It just happenstance happening. But the actual aggressive moving of this Jurassic World series towards the principles of Planet Zoo, right? And in many ways, that is solidified in this game as well. This moves even closer. However, as much as that concerned me, that it would lose its identity along the way, they actually did the impossible. And this game is very much, at the same time, a sequel to the first game and a sequel to the second game. That might sound a little bit silly saying that, but I always found going from 1 to 2 to be this sort of half side jump. Yes, the fidelity and the graphics went up, and the jump from 2 to 3, in many ways, you can see that sequelitis. This looks like a sequel to 2, but it doesn't really look like 1. 1 had a different idea of its artistic design and graphics, and you could say dated, but I would argue it was just a different philosophy under the hood. So as far as that aesthetic and that focus on the creatures and the animations and the parksmanship and that more sort of cozy, whatever you want to call it, vibe that you get from Planet Zoo that 2 and in turn 3 have pushed towards, a lot of the principles under the hood with the campaign and the way that the gameplay actually flows mechanically are much more in line with Jurassic World Evolution 1. So I think it should keep everybody happy, honestly, because I know I'm not the only person that found themselves a little bit out of sorts with Jurassic Evolution 2. And that was my big concern going into this, is this a sequel to 2 or is it a sequel to 1 after a fashion? Anyway, I'm talking sort of broadly. Let's get into the nitty-gritty. I would say from a design perspective, in a word, this game is elegant. And funnily enough, I've been playing some Europa Universalis 5 on the back end. I haven't done a video or anything like that yet, but as cumbersome as that world is, and all the mechanics and telegraphing it to the player will necessarily be difficult, in a way, the way that this game telegraphs the moving parts under the hood and just lets you look at the engine and see how it all works, to continue the analogy, this is nowhere near as complex as EU5, of course. But in a way, it's telegraphing its bite of the pie, puts it to shame. An example would be if you go into the way that the star system on your park is broken down, and to be clear, your kind of general objective in all of these games is to get your park to 5 stars. And there'll be multiple parks over the course of the campaign that you handle, but let's just leave all that for the moment and worry about the star rating. The star rating has been broken down into much more interesting and readable moving parts than any of the previous games. Generally speaking, there are 4 subcategories for what makes up the star rating. And I actually think there's these sort of staple standard ones. Like if you go into Sandbox and you generate an island or you use a template from the past, they're all going to be the same. So you could call them the cornerstone ones. And I think there's something like species diversity, or prestige, species prestige, like the individual quality of the genome of the dinosaur, etc. Some dinosaurs are sexier than others. They've introduced birth and breeding and all that into this, and so multiple generations bred down as opposed to being out of the test tube, they have a higher prestige. So there's a whole thing in there, but that's one segment of what makes a 5-star park. The other ones are things like profit per minute, or I should say income per minute. It's not necessarily profit. Other ones is species diversity, so the different types of species. And I can't remember the other ones, bloody guest satisfaction or something like that, right? But from the table in your base, it has, between each table on the screen, it has little flow arrows, little animated things, and it shows you this next part is downstream from that part, right? And so when you go into that economy screen and have a look, you see like one of the first stepping off points is guests coming through the front gate. And that's pretty basically dictated by species that are viewable. This has always been something this game has played with, this series has played with, is the ability to see all the dinosaurs. It's all good and well to just have them wandering around, but you still need that interplay between guests getting eyes over them. So, you know, if you've got 30 different dinosaurs in the park and you can only see 29 or whatever, this actually affects the very first metric of people going through the gate. And then I think the second one, I'm doing all this off the top of my head by heart, but I think the second one is like species diversity, right? And there'll be a target, and essentially there's a penalty, right? Which makes sense. You're starting from the bottom, you're starting from like 1 star working up. Essentially, you're at like a -10 penalty because you've only got 1 out of 10 species or whatever, right? So it's pretty basic stuff. And then that flows on to, I don't know what you would call the metric, but it's generally like the secure feeling of your guests. And that will be things like coverage of the park, of some pretty basic cornerstones. They've broken them down pretty cleanly. You've got like toilet coverage, shelter coverage. So if there's a storm or dinosaurs break out of the fence, people need security. There's hotel accommodation. There's food, there's drink, and then there's gift shops as well, right? So you essentially want coverage of that as much as possible. And then that has like a split flow on into actual straight profit, but also off to the side to amenity quality, which is something I think they've introduced in this game. It might have been in 2, but you can go down into like the gift shop and say, oh, we're going to stock it with plushies or bloody, you know, hats and t-shirts. And depending on what you have in your park dictates the quality of person that comes. Oh, that sounds pretty. That's maybe I'll take that one back. It's more the demographic, right? So the person might be there because they like adventure, right? So if you've got a whole bunch of carnivores, that will kind of dictate the throughput of people coming to your park. So you have these more adventure junkie people, and that in turn will affect what you want, even in the food. Maybe they like spicier food or whatever. I haven't looked at the too much. I just look at the numbers. Numbers go up, Scarlet happy, but you know. The people that like dinosaurs that eat leaves and all that probably, you know, like plushies. Whereas I don't know, the carnivore lovers probably like buying sharp knife sets. Who knows? But anyway, my point is that there is a robust system and it dictates how many people go through the gate, how much money you're extracting from them, how satisfied they are as well. So it's not just a blind, vampiristic capitalism simulator. And then through all of that as well, you marry that income management, which is kind of side of house, with the other side of house, which is the star level increasing your park. Now, again, if you're not really a fan of the series, maybe a lot of this doesn't actually mean anything to you. It's like, well, of course, Scarlet, you got to make money by giving people gift shops, and you got to increase the star level of your park, right? That's true. That's been a principle all along. But my point that I'm trying to impress is it is telegraphed so incredibly cleanly. And I am someone who loves stats and figuring out the moving parts and how it works. But I feel, honestly, if you're someone that maybe sits outside that bubble, maybe you are a bit more of a, let's say, an artistic, gentle soul. You want to see the cute little dinosaur babies growing up, right? But you're intimidated by stat lines and spreadsheets and all that. This is the most accessible, user-friendly thing. I would recommend this game, and specifically its interface to statistics and economic management, to anyone that has ever felt intimidated by any of those systems in any game. Big blanket statement. Now, again, it's a bit tough because I'm someone that loves living in the spreadsheet. I was born in the spreadsheet, right? But like, I truly think, even from my bias of this side of the fence, that this would be incredibly accessible to someone that isn't really a big numbers person. It's a flow chart. It's just so readable. Anyway, I've spent so much time on that, but that to me is the most important part of the game. Again, in many ways, this video is a mess because it's a bit of a companion piece to the previous one and it's a bit of a reset of the format, but hey, that's what you guys are here for, is the flow of consciousness messiness. They've obviously introduced breeding dinosaurs. I feel like this is a bit of a copy-paste system from the Planet Zoo thing. That's not a bad thing. They are cute as anything. I mentioned it previously, and it never got old. It never got old watching these little babies trot around and dance around and nestle up to their mothers and all that. And, you know, being the fact that I'm a bit of a battle royale psychopath and I like throwing all the dinosaurs in together and seeing what happens, even I got a bit apprehensive about that when you know, oh no, not the babies. As I watched like a pack of, what are they, the bloody goanna frilled neck spitter dudes take down a herbivore right in front of its baby, and the baby was screaming and running around in circles, and dare I say, I felt bad for a hot second. But they have like a whole cohabitation thing. They have territories that move, and throwing things all in and just trying to create a wild simulator is actually much more engaging and enjoyable and fun for someone like me who kind of enjoys a bit of the chaos. But I like the idea of it, like creating its own emergent ecosystem. I had two groups of carnivores right up against each other, and they wouldn't budge. They had a little bit of overlap and they'd keep punching on. And so I was like, okay, what are you guys like? What are you guys like? Right, you like swamps, you like plains. All right, neither of you like arid. So I just get in there with the terrain painting tool and paint a strip of arid right between where their territories meet. And then they started being like, oh, I don't know if this is worth fighting over, right? So their territories slowly started to migrate apart and shrink, and wouldn't you know it, after a while, they just stopped butting heads and overlapping, and then they were very happy all of a sudden. And all they had to do was, you know, put an unpleasant piece of land between them that they both agreed on not liking. This is just one example of the nature of the beast of the game. A couple of other things worth mentioning, because I do want to wrap it up. I'm obviously quite smitten, and I think I've gotten across my main point, which honestly was the economic back end and the readability of it. But some points that I raised that I kind of want to walk back on the previous video. One, there's a challenge mode in here that I was very critical of because they've sort of abandoned the previous challenge mode. It would seem within those, 10 challenges that are there, one or two of them are gimmicky ones, and the one that I just happened to pick, I think it might have been the first one, was just that, where you have to kind of go along a bit of a path and take photographs against a clock, right? And you can do it to different difficulty settings, like all the way up to Jurassic. That's always been the hardest in challenge mode. But most of the other challenge modes are these scenarios where it's like taking over a park that's half broken. It has its own unique objectives. And then you get a part-time, depending on difficulty, to fix it. What I'm getting at is that is very much in the spirit of the original challenge mode from the first game. But like I said, I accidentally misrepresented it when I first looked at this, because why wouldn't I? The first one I played was radically different. Turns out, I think there were two of them in the entire playlist of like 10 to 20 challenge modes. The other 18 are old school, you know, part-time 2-3 hours to fix a park, and it's really brutal and against you. So all that's still in there. My main complaint about Sandbox still stands. For whatever reason, you know, you've got creative mode, which is everything unlimited and free, and then you've got standard mode. But by default, standard mode gives you infinite money. I gave it an earnest shot for probably an hour to sort of understand, like, why they would do that. And I guess I came to realize that money is only a bottleneck on occasion. I can see that you could happily play that with infinite money. You don't have to worry about balancing startup capital or anything like that. Your star level for your park is still dictated by your income per minute, not your profit per minute. So it is a best of both worlds that you could probably just hire infinite scientists or right up to the cap and research like crazy and just have the park running at an absolute loss technically. But at the same time, you still are mechanically required to push the star level to, you know, increase the amenities appeal and the overlay for the park. There still needs to be gift shops. You still need dinosaur variety and all that to cater to the guests coming through the gate. So while that profit will go up and hypothetically you're burning money like it's going out of style and running at a massive loss, you could still push your star level up. So I think I get what they're going for. It just does frustrate me that there's a sandbox mode called creative and there is a sandbox mode called standard, And I would have thought standard would actually have some sort of challenging limitation attached to the money, not unlimited by default. I did go in there and set everything to max one at a time, do a custom thing, and that took me like 5 or 10 minutes just moving every single slider and making sure it all worked. And one of them was obviously the money thing, and I set that to 0 because that seemed to be the hardest setting. And wouldn't you know it, when I launched the thing, I had no money. I mean, it makes sense saying it out loud, but like, I think maybe you're starting to understand my concern with the issue. There's a creative set, that's fine. All the creative people are happy, but what about someone like me who actually wants a bit of a challenge, right? Why isn't standard mode got limited money? And why isn't there a Jurassic mode or something with all the things turned up to max except maybe low money? Because, like I said, I'm not going back in there to spend 10 minutes setting all the presets and only modifying the money one instead of 0 to low or whatever to get around what was essentially a bricked playthrough. There was no way to generate money at all that way. Anyway, look, it might seem like a little thing to be hung up on, especially if you're attracted to the sandbox nature of it. But personally, I enjoy a bit of an objective to it. And this series has potentially, high difficulty options, which I enjoy engaging with. Oh, and look, and before I forget and wind up, again, absolute mess of a video. I apologize, but we're back, baby. It's just like 2 years ago. The campaign mode, which is what I've been exclusively playing for like 18 hours, I'm still not finished. In the second game, they got Chaos Theory or whatever it was called. The campaign in that went for like 3 hours. It was a travesty. And again, like I said, the Planet Zoo enthusiasts that just want a sandbox experience still celebrated that second game. But a lot of the people like me that enjoy a bit of an objective, a bit of a challenge imposed upon you were really quite upset because the campaign previously had been so unique. There's this back and forth between islands. You'll push one island to 1 star, then you'll jump to the next island. You'll unlock more research. You'll go back to the first island and push it up another star. So all of that spirit is actually in this. And like I said, at 18 hours, I mean, I've spent a couple of hours in sandbox and all that playing around. Let's call it 16 hours. I still haven't beaten the campaign. I must be getting close. It's unlocked in batches, multiple parks. I think I've got 3, 6, 9 parks unlocked at the moment. I haven't 5-starred any of them. A lot of them are 4-star, right? And they introduce some really interesting mechanics, and it forces you to play all the different play styles. So Cretaceous cruises and hot air balloons and giant lagoons with megalodons, right? So it does a really good job of getting you to play every component, every type of gameplay, whether it's herbivores or carnivores or whatever. And like I said, it's longer, maybe even than the original campaign from the first game. Anyway, let's wrap this up. This video is going on very long. I apologize, but only half-heartedly. I feel good about kind of bringing back the raw format, honestly. And look, if you've made it this far as well, just to close out, because if you are here listening to me, dear listener, dear viewer, dear super fan who made it bloody, 20, 30 minutes into a video, I'm playing with the idea of not just doing new releases in current year, but also weaving a decade removed as well. So maybe every second video will actually be a game from like 2015 or whatever. Valued feedback, always welcome, how you think about that. But I like the idea of doing that, retreading it, and it also keeps me grounded, right? Am I expecting too much of current year games? Am I getting on the current zeitgeist? Or, gaming's doomed and terrible. I don't really feel that way, but maybe we prop up the games from 10 years ago in our mind's eye a little bit more than they deserve. Or maybe they deserve exactly that, but the only way to know is to go back and retread old ground. So that's something I'm thinking about. And my last final thing would be an appeal. I'm doing this full time now. I've pivoted from my government contracting work, which is, sort of my day job. So I'm eating me-goring noodles and counting every penny. And on that, I'm appealing to people to join as a member. That really, really helps. And like I said, if you've made it this far, you're probably just the candidate. There's a really low tier for like $1 or $2 a month or whatever. And if you find that I'm actually helping you pick out games that you want and you get entertainment from me, well, maybe I'm worth throwing a couple of bucks a month to keep that dream alive, because we're riding the lightning right now. We're right on the rim. I think I can do it, but a few more members would lock it down. Anyway, look, let's wrap that up. Videos will probably be shorter in the future. What can I say? I was a little bit excited about this game and about going back to my roots. Anyway, team, might just leave it there for the time being, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.